In 1932, a farmer in the Oklahoma Panhandle needed a plow and had 11 cents to his name. So he built one from a cracked wagon axle, a leaf of buggy spring, and 2 bolts pulled from a dead threshing machine. That plow outlived him. His grandson still keeps it hanging in the barn. All across America, farmers didn't buy their tools. They made them out of scrap iron, barn wood, worn-out machines, and pure stubbornness. And these tools didn't last a season. They lasted 50 years, sometimes 100. Number 4 on this list was so simple, no factory ever bothered to sell it, because every farmer could build a better one in an afternoon. And number 1 sharpened everything else on the place. Before we count down, hit that subscribe button, because these forgotten tools built the country you're standing in. Let's start with number 20. Number 20, the husking peg. Every fall, before mechanical pickers, a whole family walked the rows by hand and stripped thousands of ears of corn, one at a time. The tool that made it possible cost nothing. A farmer took a scrap of hardwood, a chunk of bone left from butchering, or a bent horseshoe nail, and shaped a small hook that strapped across the palm with a bootlace. The peg tore the husk open in a single motion, so the ear could be snapped free and thrown into the wagon in one clean arc. A good husker could clear 100 bushels a day, the wagon's bangboard ringing as ear after ear hit it in the gray light before dawn. Children learned on the pegs their fathers had outgrown, the leather worn soft and black. Catalogs sold fancy steel ones for a dime, but most men swore theirs was better, filed to fit one particular hand. When the mechanical picker arrived, the peg went into a coffee can in the shed and stayed there 50 years. Number 19, the hog scraper. Come the first hard freeze, butchering day arrived, and the whole family gathered around the scalding barrel in a cloud of steam. To take the bristles off a scalded hog, a farmer needed a scraper, and few ever bought one. He cut a disc from the lid of a lard can or a worn plow point, filed a lip on the edge, and fit it to a short wooden handle. Dragged in short, firm strokes across the hot hide, it lifted the hair clean and left the skin pale and smooth. The work had to move fast before the carcass cooled and the bristles set. Neighbors traded labor, one family's butchering this week, another's the next, and the scrapers passed hand to hand around the barrel. The tin ones wore thin and were simply cut fresh from the next empty can. That was the beauty of it. The tool renewed itself. When packing houses took the work into town, the ritual faded, but the old scrapers still turn up in barn cleanouts, bright as the day they were cut. Number 18, the corn knife. Before the binder and the silo filler, a man cut his fodder by hand, stalk by stalk, acre by acre. The blade that did it was almost never store-bought. A farmer took a broken crosscut saw, a snapped scythe, or a length of buggy spring steel, heated it, hammered it flat, ground along single edge, then riveted on a handle wrapped in leather or old inner tube. Swung low, it took a cornstalk off at the ground in one stroke, and a steady man could shock an acre a day, building the bundles into teepees that dotted the field like a little village. The knife lived on a nail by the door, its handle darkened with sweat, its edge touched up on the grindstone every morning. Homemade steel out of an old saw held an edge better than the soft imported blades, and every farmer knew it. Tractor-drawn choppers ended the handwork, but the knives were too good to throw out. They became brush hooks and kindling splitters, earning their keep for decades after the last corn was shocked by hand. Number 17, the post maul and driver. Anyone who ever set a fence line knows the misery of it, and in the days before augers and hydraulic pounders, a man drove his posts by muscle and gravity. The driver was built from whatever was heavy and dead. Some sawed a 2-foot chunk off a hardwood log, bored a handle into each side, and banded the ends with an iron wagon tire ring so it wouldn't split. Others filled a length of scrap pipe with molten lead or old Babbitt-bearing metal and capped it. Lifted overhead and brought down square on the post top, it sank oak and locust into prairie sod without a crack. The rhythm carried across a quiet field for miles, the dull, heavy thud, the pause, the thud again. A crew could set a quarter-mile of fence in a day this way. The homemade mauls outlasted 3 generations of the men who swung them, and you'll still find one leaning in the corner of an old machine shed, the handle polished smooth by 100,000 blows. Number 16, the feed trough. When a farmer needed to water and feed his stock, he rarely bought a trough. He found a downed log, a soft cottonwood or basswood was best, squared the ends, and hollowed the length of it with an adze and a chisel until it held 20 gallons. Set on 2 flat stones in the barnyard, that hollowed log fed hogs, watered horses, and cooled cream cans on a hot day. Green wood cracked, so the wise ones seasoned the log a year before they cut it, and a good trough could serve a lifetime. The inside worn glass smooth by the tongues of animals. Some families kept the very same trough their grandfather had chopped, patched here and there with a strip of tin over a split. Galvanized tanks eventually rolled in on the freight cars and made the log troughs look primitive, but a metal tank froze solid in January and split at the seams by spring. The old log absorbed the cold and held together. Thrift like that wasn't a choice. It was survival. Number 15, the shoulder yoke. Before a windmill pumped water to the barn and the house, someone carried it, bucket by bucket, from the well or the spring, and the tool that saved a person's back was a curved wooden yoke laid across the shoulders. A farmer shaped it from a single piece of soft, straight-grained wood, carving a hollow to fit the neck and notching each end for a rope and hook. With a full pail swinging from either side, the weight rode on the strong muscles of the shoulders instead of dragging down 2 aching arms. A woman could carry water to a summer kitchen, slop to the hogs, or milk from the barn without spilling a drop, her hands free for the gate latch. The yoke hung on a peg by the back door, worn shiny where it met the neck. Rural electricity and the pressure pump made it a relic almost overnight, and folks were glad to be rid of the carrying. But that hand-carved yoke had spared a million backs, and more than a few still hang in farmhouse entryways as quiet monuments to how heavy an ordinary day once was. Number 14, the buck saw. Every farm ran on wood, for the cook stove, the heating stove, the smokehouse, and cutting it took a saw a man could build himself in an evening. The buck saw was a simple 8-shaped frame of scrap oak or a couple of barrel staves, tensioned with a twisted loop of baling wire or rope that pulled a narrow blade bar tight. When the blade dulled or snapped, he bought a new blade for a nickel and kept the frame he already had. 2 people worked the woodpile with it, or one man alone rode a log on a sawbuck, the blade singing back and forth, sawdust piling in a soft yellow drift at his boots. A winter's heat, a full woodshed by first snow. All of it came off the teeth of a saw a farmer had lashed together with wire. Chainsaws made the buck saw obsolete in a single generation, loud and fast and thirsty for gasoline. But the frame saws hung on in barns for the day the engine wouldn't start and the stove still had to be fed. Number 13, the grain flail. Long before a threshing machine ever chuffed into the yard, small grain was beaten out by hand, and the flail was the tool that did it. It was 2 sticks and nothing more, a long handle of ash and a shorter, heavier swingle, joined by a loop of rawhide or a strip of harness leather so the beater could whip free. The farmer spread his wheat or oats or beans across a clean barn floor, then raised the flail and brought the swingle whistling down, again and again, until the grain shattered loose from the straw and heads. It was slow, sweaty, dusty work, done in the barn on rainy days when field work stopped, the rhythmic thump echoing off the mow. A man learned the timing young, or he cracked his own skull. When the steam thresher and the combine took the job, the flail should have vanished entirely. Instead, it hung in the granary for the small patch of buckwheat or the sack of beans no machine would bother with, still doing honest work a full century after the mechanical world was supposed to have retired it. Number 12, the wooden wheelbarrow. A store-bought barrow cost real money, so a farmer built his own out of scrap boards, a worn buggy wheel, and a couple of hand-hewn handles. The wheel came off a broken cart or a discarded baby carriage. The box was nailed up from packing crates or shed siding. The whole thing was greased with a dab of axle tallow and put to work. It hauled manure to the garden, seed potatoes to the field, corn to the crib, and the day's kindling to the porch. When a handle cracked, he whittled a new one. When the box rotted through, he nailed on fresh boards and kept the wheel. That single wheel might roll under 3 or 4 different barrows across a lifetime. Steel wheelbarrows with pneumatic tires eventually filled the hardware stores and rolled smoother than any homemade rig. But the old wooden barrows kept creaking along the barn paths for decades, patched and repatched, because a tool you built with your own hands was a tool you never quite let die. Number 11, the ox and neck yoke. In the earliest years of a homestead, before there was money for a fine leather horse harness, a farmer worked oxen, and he carved their yoke himself. He chose a heavy beam of well-seasoned hardwood, shaped it to ride across the necks of a matched pair, then bored it for the hand-forged bows that curved up under each animal's throat. Every yoke was fitted to one specific team. The curves worked to match the exact set of their shoulders, because a poorly shaped yoke galled an ox raw and cost a man his plowing. The wood was rubbed with oil until it glowed, and a good yoke, hung high in the barn out of the damp, served a lifetime and then a son's lifetime after. Oral tradition on old farms held that a man's yoke told you what kind of stockman he was. Tractors and better harness ended the age of the ox, but the carved yokes were too handsome to burn, and today they hang over barn doors and fireplaces, the last proof of the patient partnership between a man and his animals. Number 10, the hand, corn sheller. Every ear of corn had to be stripped of its kernels before it could be ground or sold or fed. And in the lean years that job was done by hand, with a sheller, a farmer cobbled together himself. The simplest was a ring of iron, or a tin funnel studded with nail heads or old harness rivets. You shoved an ear through and twisted, and the kernels rained off into the bucket. Others built a cob-worn wooden block or bolted a broken cast-iron sheller back together with baling wire. On winter nights, the whole family sat around the granary lantern, shelling seed corn by hand, thumbs raw, the kernels drumming into the pan, and the bare cobs tossed toward the stove for kindling. Nothing was wasted. The cob heated the house, and the kernels fed the stock. Powered shellers and the corn picker eventually did the whole job in the field. But the little hand shellers stayed in the seed shed, still perfect for the careful work of shelling out next year's seed by hand, one prized ear at a time. Number 9, the wooden hay rake. Come haying time, a farmer needed to gather the mown grass into windrows, and the rake he used was very likely one he'd whittled over the winter. The head was a straight bar of ash, bored full of holes. Into each he drove a hand-carved hardwood tooth, split and shaped and dried by the stove until it was hard as bone. A long, springy handle and a couple of curved braces finished it. The whole thing light enough for a woman or a boy to swing all day. When a tooth broke on a hidden stone, he tapped it out and drove in a new one in under a minute. Try that with a factory rake. It cleaned a hayfield gently without tearing the stubble and gathered the loose ends the horse rake left behind. Steel rakes and then the side delivery machine took over the meadows, but the wooden rakes never entirely left. Light, silent, and endlessly repairable, they hung in the haymow for the corners and fence lines no machine could reach, right into living memory. Number 8. The wire fence stretcher. When barbed wire fenced the open country, every farmer faced the same problem: how to pull a sagging strand drum tight against a corner post without it whipping loose and slashing him open. The answer, for most, was a stretcher built from scrap. A length of old chain, a couple of bolts, and a hardwood lever became a ratcheting come-along that gripped the wire and hauled it taut a notch at a time. Some rigged a block and a horse. Others forged a simple clamp from 2 flat bars and a wedge. Whatever the design, it turned a dangerous 2-man wrestling match into a job one man could manage, cranking the barbed strand until it hummed like a fiddle string. A tight fence kept the stock in and the neighbors friendly, and a loose one started feuds. The homemade stretchers lived in the fencing bucket alongside the staples and the pliers, greased against rust. Manufactured come-alongs eventually did it slicker, but plenty of farms fixed fence with Grandpa's scrap iron stretcher for half a century because it worked and it was already paid for. Number 7. The single tree. Behind every horse-drawn implement hung a humble bar of wood that most people today have never heard of, the single tree, and its bigger brother, the double tree. It was the swinging pivot that connected the horse's traces to the plow or the wagon, letting the animals pull evenly and letting their shoulders swing naturally as they walked. A farmer shaped it from a tough length of hickory or oak, cut to exact size, then fitted it with hooks and a center clevis forged at the crossroads, blacksmith or hammered out cold on the anvil in the shed. Balance was everything. A single tree cut a hair off center, pulled the whole rig crooked, and wore out a horse on one side. The wood took the full strain of a team lunging into a stuck plow, so only the best-grained timber would do. When tractors replaced the teams, the single trees came off the harness and hung on the barn wall. Nothing about a plow so quietly decided whether a day's work went smooth or sour, and nothing has been so completely forgotten. Number 6. The well sweep. Before the windmill and the pitcher pump, drawing water was a daily chore, and one of the oldest tools in the world lifted it, the well sweep. A tall, forked post stood beside the well, and across the fork, balanced a long pole, weighted heavy at one end with a stone or a chunk of scrap iron. From the light end hung a bucket on a slender pole or a length of chain. The farmer pulled the bucket down into the dark, cool shaft, let it fill, and then the counterweight did the lifting, swinging the full pail up almost on its own. A child could draw water this way, the sweep creaking and bowing against the sky like some slow bird. Every part came from the farm itself: a forked tree, a straight pole, a rock. Drilled wells and windmills eventually made the sweep a curiosity, and pressurized plumbing finished it off. But for 200 years it was the sound of morning on an American farm, the groan of the sweep and the splash far below, and there are folks alive who still remember the taste of that cold water it brought up. Number 5, the fanning mill. After the grain was threshed, it came off dirty, mixed with chaff, weed seed, dust, and broken straw, and to clean it, a farmer built or rebuilt a fanning mill. It was a wooden cabinet housing a hand-cranked fan and a set of stacked, shaking screens, and though a few were bought, countless more were pieced together and endlessly repaired from scrap lumber, old harness leather, and salvaged tin. A boy turned the crank while grain poured in the top. The fan blew the light chaff out the back, while the screens sorted the good kernels from the trash, the whole box rattling and roaring in the granary. Clean seed meant a clean crop the next year, so a good mill was prized and guarded, its screens carefully sized for wheat, oats, or clover. The dust it threw hung golden in the barn light for hours. Grain elevators and combine cleaning systems eventually took the job. But the fanning mill sat in the corner of the granary for generations, hauled out every planting time to clean the seed one more year, refusing to quit. Number 4, the drag harrow. After the plow broke the ground into rough clods, something had to smash them fine before seed could go in, and the cheapest something a farmer ever built was a drag harrow. The most basic version was pure scrap genius, a bundle of thorny brush or a section of small log wired together, dragged across the field to break the crust. The fancier home-built kind was a heavy plank frame studded with hand-forged iron spikes or even long-cut nails driven through drilled holes, weighted down with a rock or the farmer's own boy riding on top for ballast. Behind a plodding team, it pulverized the clods, leveled the ridges, and left a smooth seed bed in a cloud of dust. No factory ever needed to sell the brush drag, because any man with a saw and a coil of wire could build a better one in an afternoon to fit his own ground. Spring tooth and disc harrows on tractors did it faster later on, but the humblest scrap and brush drag prepared more American seed beds than any machine ever built. Number 3, the grain cradle. Of all the hand tools that fed the country, none demanded more skill to build or to swing than the grain cradle. It was a scythe with a wooden addition, a light frame of curved, tapered fingers bolted above the blade, and a farmer often shaped those fingers himself, steaming and bending thin ash to match the arc of the cutting edge exactly. As the harvester swung, the blade cut the standing wheat, and the fingers caught the falling stalks, laying them in a neat gavel, all heads pointing one way, ready to be bound into a sheaf. A master cradler moved through a field of ripe grain in a long, rolling rhythm, 3 acres in a day, the wheat falling in orderly rows behind him like a wake behind a boat. Building the cradle to balance right took a craftsman's eye. Swinging it all day took the back of an ox. The reaper and the binder retired it, and thank God for the men's spines. But the cradle was the tool that turned a wild field into bread, and it deserves to be remembered. Number 2, the stone boat. Anyone who ever farmed rocky ground knew the endless curse of stones, heaved up fresh by the frost every single spring, littering the field, ready to snap a plowshare or break a mower knife. So the farmer built a stone boat, a low, flat sledge, usually a couple of thick oak planks pinned together with a curled-up front edge, dragged behind a team with no wheels at all. Low to the ground, a man could roll a boulder up onto it that he could never lift into a wagon. He worked the field in a slow crawl, prying and rolling stones aboard, then hauling the load to the fence line, where generations of those stones became the long rock walls that still lace the countryside today. A stone boat cost nothing but a few planks and a chain, and it slid over sod and mud where a wheel would only bog. It moved rocks, hay, feed, even a sick calf. The scrap plank stone boat cleared the fields that fed the nation, one frost-heaved rock at a time, and it never once needed a wheel. Number 1, the grindstone. And in first place, the one tool that made every other tool on this list possible, the farm grindstone. A round wheel of natural sandstone mounted on a hand-forged axle in a homemade wooden frame, turned by a foot treadle or a hand crank, with an old tin can dripping water onto the stone to keep it cool. Every scythe, every axe, every corn knife, every plow point on the place came to the grindstone to be made sharp again, and a dull tool on a farm was worse than no tool at all. A boy earned his keep turning the crank, while his father held the blade to the wheel, the stone hissing and throwing a fine spray, the edge slowly coming back to life. It sat under a tree or in the shed, and on a busy morning there was always a line: the mower blade, the hand sickle, the butcher knife. Powered grinders and cheap replaceable blades ended its reign, but many a grindstone still stands in a farmyard, half sunk in the grass, a quiet monument to an age when nothing was thrown away and everything was made to last. It sharpened the tools that broke the ground, and the tools that broke the ground built America. So there they are, 20 tools that farmers built from scrap and trusted for 50 years and more. Not one of them came from a store. Everyone came from a downed log, a broken machine, a coil of wire, and a pair of hands that refused to quit. Which of these did your grandfather own? Which one is still hanging in a barn somewhere in your family right now? Drop it in the comments. I want to know which forgotten tool you remember. And if this reminded you of where you came from, hit subscribe, because we've got more of these coming. Thanks for watching.